Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and this will be part 3 of the video series on how to progress hypertrophy training, and in this video we will cover how hypertrophy training can be progressed from mesocycle to mesocycle. In the previous video, we explored the various methods of progressing hypertrophy training from week to week. We will now cover how to progress training from mesocycle to mesocycle. Before we do this, let's quickly define what a mesocycle is. A mesocycle is basically just a block of training. This encompasses multiple overloading weeks of training and usually one deload week. Overloading training is where the goal is to stimulate adaptations, while deloading training is where the goal is to reduce fatigue while maintaining adaptations. Usually a mesocycle of training consists of one deload week for every 2 to 5 weeks of overloading training. During a deload week, volume is generally reduced by around 30 to 50% from the regular overloading training volume, while all other variables can remain the same. Before we get into the programming details, we first need to establish something. We need to understand that there is no single best way to program and progress training. There are many different ways to adjust training from mesocycle to mesocycle, and it is more about knowing when to change different variables. We don't really need to apply progressive overload in the same sense as the week-to-week progression. Rather, this is more about managing training from a long-term perspective. Let's now cover what variables can be changed and when this may be applicable. There are 3 primary ways we can make alterations to our hypertrophy training program from mesocycle to mesocycle. Let's now cover what these are and how they can be applied. The first strategy we can implement is to actually change nothing at all. Like we mentioned in the previous video, trainees don't have to necessarily force progressive overload to occur. It will occur naturally over time, provided that you are training with a sufficiently overloading stimulus. So if training is progressing well, and you don't feel like you need to change anything, then you can simply keep the following mesocycle exactly the same, and still continue to progress over time. For example, let's use the same example of the dumbbell shoulder press from the previous video. Here the trainee performs 3 sets with 1 to 2 reps in reserve, and the following reps and load were performed. In the next mesocycle, the trainee may keep the same number of sets and the same proximity to failure, and still see continual progress. For example, the following mesocycle may look something like this. As we can see here, the trainee is still slowly progressing over time, despite some minor fluctuations in performance from week to week. The next variable we could change from mesocycle to mesocycle is volume. This could mean either increasing volume for some muscle groups, decreasing volume, or reallocating volume between muscle groups. Let's now cover when each of these volume changes might apply. The first method we can apply is to increase volume. Since volume appears to be the primary driver of hypertrophy, if trainees want to see a faster rate of muscle growth, they can increase how many sets they perform for that muscle group per week. However, there are 3 factors we need to consider before increasing volume. First is joint health. If the joints and connective tissue relevant to the particular muscle group feel healthy and pain-free, then volume could be increased. Second is systemic fatigue. If the trainee's total weekly volume is adequate for them to recover from and they feel systemically recovered, then volume could be increased. And third is practicality. Trainees must be able to allocate more time and willingness to train when volume is increased. If all 3 of these factors are considered, then volume may be increased if desired. For example, a trainee may want to see a faster rate of growth for their shoulders. So instead of performing 3 sets of dumbbell shoulder press twice per week, they may add an extra set to each day, taking their weekly volume from 6 to 8 direct sets. Furthermore, volume could be decreased for some muscle groups if they are experiencing issues. There are 3 primary reasons why volume may need to be reduced. First is due to joint pain or irritation. If a trainee is experiencing some sort of joint discomfort or gradual irritation over time, then they may be doing too much volume for that joint to handle. This could also be due to other factors like poor technique or using heavier loads than necessary, but volume will be a major contributor. In this case, a reduction in volume for these exercises or that muscle group may help to dissipate the issue. Second is due to excessive systemic fatigue. If trainees are performing so much total training volume over the week, especially with compound lifts, then they may be excessively systemically fatigued. This can lead to an increase in risk of illness, reductions in lifting performance, disrupted sleep, or some other negative consequences. In this case, it may be wise to reduce volume of the most systemically taxing exercises in the program, like squat and deadlift variations. And the last reason why trainees may want to reduce volume is due to practical reasons. If training is taking up too much time or effort for a particular trainee, they can reduce their total weekly volume. As long as they are still within the overloading range, then progress will still be made, although maybe at a slightly slower rate. If you are aware and okay with this trade-off, then volume can certainly be reduced if desired. And the last adjustment we could make to volume from mesocycle to mesocycle is to reallocate volume. This refers to keeping a similar total weekly number of sets, but redistributing it based on preference. Trainees may want to particularly emphasize some muscle groups over others due to how fast different muscle groups are growing, genetic strengths and weaknesses, or personal preference. It may be difficult for some trainees to simply add more volume because they may not have the time to train any longer, or they may run into systemic recovery issues. So volume reallocation simply helps adjust the rate of which different muscles grow. For example, let's use this standard hypertrophy mesocycle. This program was created in a previous video which you can find on this channel, titled Training for Strength vs Hypertrophy, where you can see in detail how each variable was prescribed. Let's say that this trainee is progressing well with most of their muscle groups, but their biceps are lagging slightly behind the rest of their body. In this case, the trainee may take some volume away from other exercises and increase volume of bicep curls. So here we can see that we have reduced the number of sets for the lateral raises and increased the sets for the biceps. Whenever volume is reallocated, it should always be done gradually. Trainees should only increase volume of certain muscle groups by 1 to 2 sets per mesocycle to allow the tissues to adapt to the new level of stress. Sudden changes in volume generally increase the risk of injury as the joints are not accustomed to that level of stress. And the last variable that we can change from mesocycle to mesocycle is exercise selection. Trainees can change exercises to a similar movement which trains the same muscle group. For example, we may replace the dumbbell shoulder press with a barbell shoulder press. This will train the same muscles, but will use a slightly different form of resistance. It should be noted that there are no best exercises to train each muscle, so trainees shouldn't feel like they are missing out on potential gains by performing a certain lift and neglecting another. While some exercises may be better or worse suited to certain individuals, there are no universal best exercises for everyone. Therefore, trainees shouldn't consistently change exercises every single mesocycle because they think that there is a magic exercise that they haven't found which will help them to make incredible gains. However, there are 3 general reasons trainees may change an exercise from mesocycle to mesocycle. The first is due to a performance plateau. This refers to a very slow rate of progress over time with a certain lift or a certain muscle group. This is natural to occur with each exercise, and changing exercises can provide a new stimulus to continue making progress. However, we should understand that as trainees become more advanced, progress will slow down with every single exercise. Changing exercises is not a magic way to spark new gains, it just provides a novel stimulus. With this new exercise, the trainee will probably mostly see gains in neural efficiency and will then eventually plateau once again. Therefore, changing exercises too frequently can be an illusion into thinking you are constantly growing muscle, but in reality you may just be seeing increases and decreases in neural efficiency. Therefore, trainees may want to only change exercises if they've been performing the same lift for a while and they are stagnating, but exercises probably shouldn't be changed too frequently. This leads us on to the next point, which is variation. Like we alluded to in the previous point, changing exercises provides a novel stimulus for the trainee to adapt to. Although these initial gains are probably largely due to neural efficiency, changing the exercise will still provide some variation in terms of the hypertrophic stimulus. Although 2 exercises may hit the same muscle groups, they may apply stress in a slightly different way and place more or less tension on different fibers. For example, a hammer strength row may hit the back from a slightly different angle and with a slightly different strength curve than a seated cable row, despite both exercises being horizontal rows. This may provide a more hypertrophic stimulus to certain portions of the back, resulting in a somewhat novel stimulus to adapt to. And the last primary reason to change exercises is due to monotony and enthusiasm. Performing the same exercises for a long period of time often leads to boredom and a lack of enthusiasm about the training protocol. This may subconsciously make trainees put less effort into training. Changing exercises, as simple as it is, can often boost training motivation and excitement, allowing trainees to enjoy training more. This will also probably increase effort in the gym and probably yield greater results. So even if it may not be necessary to switch exercises for any physiological reason, it may be a strategy to boost psychological morale and training motivation at certain points in time. So we have discussed 3 primary reasons trainees may want to change exercises from mesocycle to mesocycle, although how frequently should exercises be changed? Well, there is no specific answer to this question, rather it depends on many different variables. We don't want to change exercises too frequently, as this will simply never allow us to become effective at the exercise. Generally, trainees become more effective in terms of technique and execution the longer they perform a lift. Furthermore, the initial improvements in performance are primarily a result of neural adaptations, so trainees need to give each exercise enough time to make it maximally effective. As a general rule, most compound lifts shouldn't be changed for at least 3 to 4 mesocycles, while isolation lifts can be changed every 1 to 2 mesocycles if desired. This is because compound lifts are more complex and take longer to become effective with in terms of technique. Isolation lifts, on the other hand, are much simpler to perform and there is minimal technique adjustments that can be made. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.